Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Second Society podcast. Today I'm really excited because I sit down with Madeleine Burgett from Films by Madeleine, who is just an incredible filmmaker, but also a filmmaker who I believe has found her niche in creating authentic and emotional wedding films. Not only that, but we actually talk about a recent season that she's had of burnout and anxiousness and depression, and how she got out of that, and then also how to avoid those seasons altogether. So without further ado, check out this week's podcast. I kind of wanted to just get started and learn, yes, number one, like how you kind of got into this industry, but also like your background, like where you came from, and then what kind of drew you into filmmaking.
Totally. Yeah. So I grew up in a town called Troutdale, Oregon. It's, I don't know if you've ever been to like Multnomah Falls, like in Oregon or Portland, Oregon. It's right in that area. It's like just beautiful, lush, green, I don't know, hiking trails everywhere. It was such a cool place to grow up. And yeah, I honestly now I live in San Diego. So I came down here for college, ended up, getting married after college and staying here. So we've been here for like 10 years now. And so this is where I call home. But my films and my work really all tie to who I am. I'm like definitely an empath. I'm very like feeling oriented. My friends and I all have this joke that I'm like really sensitive. and that's just who I am. And I think I've always wanted to find outlets in my life to like bring that out and to shed light on that. Just because it is so much of who I am. And I kind of grew up, this is like so deep, but I grew up with just a lot of feelings, and I had, just some like difficult things in my own, like adversaries in my own life, that I really dove into music a lot, like diving into singing and piano and all of that. I grew up with like musical, parents, or my mom, and that's always been really inspiring. And I think being inspired by music has led into filmmaking, and they kind of just tie so perfectly together. Yeah, that was a long answer.
No, that's what I want. Yeah.
Okay.
I can always set this up, but I definitely want to just have a conversation. So like, I love that. So like, you do have a background in music. You're a musician, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that look like?
Yeah. So, that's how me and my husband met, actually, is he was my music theory tutor in college. So he is a choir director in San Diego. That's his niche. And for me, I've never done music professionally like him, but it's always been really intertwined in my life. I love listening to music, and have always felt a deep connection with that. But yeah, just singing. I've always been singing in choirs and playing various instruments. But for me, it's mostly feeling based with music, which is so different from my husband, who studied music composition, and he's very he knows the theory, he knows all of that, like in and out.
Yeah.
Where when I listen to a song with him in the car, I'm like, oh, like listen to the way like that texture is like, or like how that made you feel, or, all these different things. And which is pretty neat that music can kind of, I don't know, you can dive into music any way you want. And I've brought that into like my filmmaking too a lot as well, where for me, like technicalities aren't really as important to me as like the way it feels, and textures even too, like I mentioned. And yeah.
That's super cool. I think that's really cool about your brand. If you could label your brand with one word, it would be music. Like music is the number one thing that I see almost as your brand as a whole, like the most important thing. And then, shots and color grading and all that is great as well. But there's something that you're doing differently that I really want to tap into, which is music and space. And I think you tend to always create space. Especially like with me, if we were gonna like bounce our films back off each other, I feel like when I create films, there's a lot going on in a wedding day. And it could be just the type of weddings you're getting, but there's just a lot of shots I want to incorporate into the film. But when I watch your films, it feels like you're leaving out a ton and you're focusing on very specific parts of the wedding day that have a lot of value, or, you know, that make you feel something specific, right? And you want to lean into that a little bit more, which therefore creates just a different type of story that is really authentic and really captivating as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. Music is like, it just drives all my inspiration in my work, which is sometimes so hard because, you know, we only have so many songs we can legally use. Yeah. I think that's become kind of like a nice challenge for me, though, because, you know, I think that this is something people are starting to do more now in their work. And it's super cool that you can basically just make your own song. I mean, to an extent, but like if you have kind of a basic understanding of like music theory or like, you know, tempo, I mean, any of that, like you can really piece together a song that you want that's going to serve your film better than the original would have.
For sure.
And yeah, I know it's just feels like you tap into like a whole different world when you get, you know, used to that and you get involved with that, because I think like it just doesn't feel as limiting anymore. And you kind of feel like, oh, I can, if I want the film to kind of come down here, I can make that happen. Like I can, you know, tweak some things around and add in some stuff, you know, all these little techniques. But yeah. No, that's cool though. I'm curious what you'd say my films like leave out. I'm just curious, like from your perspective, because I hear that.
Well, and this kind of goes back to like, it could be just the type of films that you film, right? So like if you're filming more of an elopement, maybe that's just how the day was. But I think like when I watch your films, I'm looking in the background and being like, oh no, there's like 80 people there for sure. You know what I mean? Or 100 people. So you still have a decent sized wedding party, but the film feels really intimate, right? Or you choose to use a type of music that's like not upbeat during the dancing and it still works. You know what I mean? And it's tying to the whole day. So it's just like, it's not your average wedding film to where you're like, oh, a ton of dancing happened at this film and I could easily throw down like a really upbeat track here. But that's not what I feel, and that's not how I want to remember the wedding day, and that's not how I think the couple would want to remember the wedding day. So I don't know, you just tell it in a different way. It's really cool. So there's different pacing there. And then I'm just curious if you're like, if you film like a normal wedding, let's say 150 people at a venue in San Diego, do you still tell it the same way that you would, you know, an Oregon film with like 50 people at the wedding? You know what I mean? It's more outside.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think short answer is yes. I obviously like your guest count on your day really affects the feel of a day as a whole. But the clients that I'm trying to attract are ones that really value like that authenticity and want their film to feel really intimate. I just shared one that I did from a wedding in Wisconsin, and it was like this big grand wedding. It was actually a backyard wedding, which was so sweet. But they had, you know, tons of, you know, decorations. They put a lot of effort into all of that. It was beautiful. But she came to me, she actually hired another videographer, and then a month before her wedding was like, actually, I changed my mind. Like, I want somebody like this, which I was grateful for that she found me and connected with me, but she wanted something that focused more on the feeling of the day. And so for me, those are the clients that I normally attract and that normally come to me, are ones that are seeking that out, which is my favorite because I just thrive in that environment. For me, it's like, I just feel like I fit in. That's like the puzzle piece I fit into really well. Just as a person and in my own inspiration of what I want to bring out in my work. But yeah, I think creating a day that feels, or creating a film that feels intimate, and focuses in on specific like relationships on the wedding day. Still, like I'm like nodding to the fact that it is a big wedding. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of love, but focusing in on those little moments is what kind of drives me. Yeah.
Which kind of leads me into another question, which if you and I were to go film the same wedding, right? Like what are you doing differently on the wedding day that maybe you're more intentional about, as whether it could be filming style, could be, how do you speak to the couple? How do you arrange the timeline? Do you have any input before the wedding day starts to where you kind of are molding the wedding into your style already? You know what I mean? They hired you for a specific reason because they love your films and they want to bring that into their wedding, right? But they maybe did the big band and there's 150 people there. So like, what are you doing specifically, if there is anything, to make it more like that for the viewers out there that are saying like, oh, I want to film weddings just like she does, but I don't feel like I get those Oregon weddings in the rain. You know what I mean? Where it's really still and there's only like 10 people at the wedding, right?
Yeah, no, totally. Honestly, I mean, I feel like as filmmakers, we just hit so many limitations on the day. Like, it's not like a movie set, we're like presented with what we have and that's what we have to work with, which is such an admirable thing for people in our industry to just pivot to whatever we need to be doing. I think, yeah, honestly, like any specific approaches that I have, don't really happen on the day when I'm filming. It's more when I'm editing. I think editing is like when I'm kind of bringing that intimacy to life. And I think on the, like, if I could think of anything on the wedding day that I'm maybe doing differently is I'm not really focused on creating like a really beautiful shot. Like, obviously I want things to look stunning and beautiful, and like people hire wedding videographers because they want to feel elevated and they want to feel like they can see themselves in this movie of their life, and that's so beautiful. And so balancing that with also really admiring authenticity in my work and relationships, like I'm really just listening a lot. I'm listening a ton. If they say something that's like personal to them, like I had a client who I'm editing their film right now, and I listened to everything, like everything. And the client was talking about perfume that they wore when they first met this person back in like high school. So they've been together for years, and they were like, yeah, we found this perfume, so I'm going to wear it today. And in this moment, I heard them say that and was like, oh, okay, cool, but I'm not recording. And so when she started putting it on again, like things like that, I just I take these little pockets of information and like anything that could possibly personalize it to them and bring in that like bringing the viewer into their day with them in a really just like cozy way. I do. So I ended up asking them later. I was like, hey, can you just like share, if you were to tell me about your perfume again, like I would love to hear it. And then they get talking and talk about it. And like most of my clients, they trust me a lot. And so when I do ask them something like that, they know, oh, Maddie's asking this for a reason. Like, and so they'll vocalize it back. But I think that is just like having this like treasure hunting mindset where you're just there, you're capturing them, like the essence of them, and anything that kind of brings that out, a smile or like their way their face like reacts to something or subtle things that they say throughout the day. I put a lot of emphasis on getting ready a lot of the times because I feel like those moments are so sweet and they're so like anticipatory, and like just the way people are feeling in those moments, and the way like if it's like a smaller intimate day or not, and it's a smaller intimate moment in that moment in time when they're getting their suit on or dress on or whatever they want to wear, that is a time that I really love focusing on. And I set aside a good chunk of time for that in my films. Yeah.
One thing I noticed in your films is a lot of your A-cam footage looks like a second shooter shot it. And so what I mean by that is, like, I feel like as a lead shooter, you're capturing what you need to capture, right? Like the main bread and butter. And then maybe your second shooter can get a different angle and it's like a little bit blurry, or it's like a shot of their feet walking. Whereas I'm getting like the wide shot of like them pushing in and their faces are in focus, right? And then some of your films, like everything is almost out of focus, but it's beautiful. Like, are you intentionally shooting that? Are you thinking like, hey, I want this film to look like this, and so I'm going to hold my camera for 30 seconds on the waves as they crash through, and it's kind of out of focus. You know what I mean? And that's the shot you use, where, like, to me, that would have been a creative shot. If I had time, I probably would have shot that. And I'm like, oh, man.
Right.
Almost like you kind of pre-wrote the wedding day and said, hey, I want the wedding day to feel like this. What shots can go on top? Let me film that. So can you speak into that a little bit? And is that your second shooter that's doing those shots, or is it you being intentional?
So it's me. I usually don't rely a ton on my second shooter for like filming things. Most of the stuff you'll see is me, unless it's like a tight angle. For my second shooter, I really rely on my second shooter to get tights of things, because I really want them to focus on like emotions. And I shoot on actually a 50 all day. I'll punch in here and there and go wider if not, but I feel like my training and my experience in working with weddings, I really honed in on getting what I need. I feel like I'm really good at getting the shots and the angles that I need in the ceremony, for, any big events, first look, toasts. I feel confident in getting those angles. And I think that experience and confidence in getting those things has kind of allowed me some more wiggle room to get some more creative shots here and there too. And I love using those, which I feel like I don't get those a ton when I'm filming. Like maybe I'll do like maybe 5-10% like that. But I use that in my work a lot. And yeah, I love textures too in my films. So like you mentioned, like if something's a little out of focus, I probably was like trying to focus on like a texture or maybe the shot itself was like evoking emotion. You didn't need to see it in focus, but it was still evoking emotion in a different way. And yeah, I really started to hone in on perfecting those little stylistic things within my work too. Obviously still keeping things like timeless, and I try not to rely on like too many trends. But I have started to figure out trends or like little stylistic textures or things that I can do that enhance my work just a little bit more, while still keeping the integrity of their wedding and their day. Like, that's the forefront. But yeah, did that answer your question okay?
Heck yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that you're filming it like on your own, and like getting those purposely is really cool. Which I think would be cool for people to hear too. It's just like, every shot doesn't have to be the perfect, shot. Almost, you can get creative with your shots and use them and feel confident in that's going to help tell the story, if you have that in mind, which I think you do. Like, you've done a really good job with your brand where like those types of shots fit, you know what I mean? And they actually evoke a certain type of emotion. They're not out of focus because I messed up. They're out of focus because they're kind of leaving it more mysterious, right? And you're going to reveal the couple in the next couple of minutes, right? But there's like maybe a tense buildup or something like that. So it's really cool to see, someone that's mature in their filmmaking and understand that everything has a purpose. And, there's different ways of kind of showing romantics, right? So there's like so many techniques that you could do. So I thought that was really cool.
Right. Yeah, no, the romantics specifically, like that's something I've really been trying to switch up a lot. If the couple really like, I feel like they're open to, they're either really vocal or they're, comfortable in front of the camera, or not too. I mean, I think romantics, it's hard because I used to rely on them a lot. I used to really rely on like beautiful sunset shots of the two of them because they're beautiful, and clients love that too. Like they want to look like they're in a movie. Like I think people love that. But for me, sometimes I would get in my editing bay looking at the shots that I got, like when I was first starting, or even, like when I used to work for I used to work for like a volume brand company way back when. And I knew the types of things I was asking them to do when I was filming them. And they were like, just your regular stuff. Like, okay, now look at each other. Now like bring your hand up here and like bring it down and like, put your, like, on the chin. And it was all stuff that I was telling them to do. And it wasn't just naturally happening. And I don't know if this is just me, but I just kind of felt like, okay, it's stunning. Like, wow, I'm sure, if they have grandkids years from now, they're going to be like, my grandma and grandpa were so beautiful. Yep. They were amazingly beautiful and they looked stunning. But I started to think about like, man, if that was me looking at my grandparents, like I would want to see, how are they feeling? Like, what was their, like, I know grandpa has this laugh that he does. Like, I want to see what that was like back then. Like, I want to see what like, and just thinking more long-term with my work specifically. And, it's such a little pocket of what we do, but portraits and romantics. And kind of a way I've started to incorporate some intentionality within that is just listening to them. Like sometimes, couples will start talking to each other and they just say the cutest things. And I know some companies that mic people up all day, and I think that's awesome. But yeah, listening to them. Also just like I have a film that I created where I didn't pose them in any way because they told me that was uncomfortable for them. And I said, great, I won't do that. Totally understand. Like if I was in your position, I feel like I would be a little uncomfy too. Just because of who I am. But they were totally on board for just a really authentic, candid day, which isn't always, but this client, they loved that. And so I rolled with it. And I ended up realizing that, man, I actually don't need to rely on portraits as much as I thought I did. There's so many little cute moments here and there that carry so much more value to me and probably for them in, the rest of their lives than a beautiful shot of them in the sunset would. It's such a hard balance because there's beauty in both. There's no wrong answer. It's just, for me, like leaning into the more intentional, authentic things has been way more important for my work and my own heart for my work than just making it look beautiful. So yeah, it's a fine balance.
I actually argue and say that there is a right answer. I think you found the right answer, which is timeless, right? Like you go down 20, 30 years from now and you look back at that film and be like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm right there. You know what I mean? Like I hear these sounds, I hear the way he's laughing, grandpa or whatever, if it's the grandchildren watching the film or something like that. I think that's what you want. You know what I mean? You don't want the trendiness shot that was 30 years ago, right? Because that fades with time. Right. And I think now we live in a world and a society where social media is at the forefront, and like the next best thing is, on tomorrow's feed, and you're like, oh, I got to try that. Oh, I got to try that. And it's very loud, right? Like social media in general, I think is loud, and always in your face and always has the newest thing. And it's kind of like draining a little bit, but with your films, I feel like there's space and there's authenticity to where it kind of just shuts the society out for a second and says, hey, let me focus on your intimate life, right? Mm-hmm. And let me bring what you guys are feeling in this day, what, encompasses your whole life together and what that's going to look like for the future in this film. And I think you do a really good job at that. And I think we as filmmakers need to do that more often as well. Like really capturing the essence of the day rather than fast pace and, the next trend or whatever that might be.
Right. No, yeah. I think, and your work too. I feel like y'all are really great at capturing that, like the essence of a couple and their authenticity, especially for couples that have just like super fun days too. Like y'all do that really well. And I that's something, like, I'm just not like a fast-paced editor. That's just not my strong suit. And I'm okay with that. Like I kind of know where I'm at in my lane, but man, when I watch videos that y'all have and it's like this epic party scene, like the band, you just see all the elements of the party and something that could easily just become like a montage of, like people dancing crazy. I don't know. You guys just bring the essence of that out really well. I think that that's really valuable and doesn't mean it always has to be slow paced. It can still be fun and upbeat, and like you're still bringing out that essence in a timeless way too,
That's true. Yeah, there's definitely both, but I think knowing how to do both and knowing when to do both is really crucial, right? Now you're kind of 4 years in. What does that process look like? What do you use to kind of attract the clients that you're looking to get? And then how do you know when to say no to a client and when to say yes? Because I feel like you probably say yes to the clients where it's going to fit your style, where your style is going to shine the most on the given day, and where you're going to connect the most with a couple. Would you agree with that?
Right. There's a lot of different like ways I kind of vet that, but I think just initially in the inquiry, I want to I love getting inquiries from people that like really take time to fill that out. And I know a lot of people just don't have a ton of time. They're probably reaching out to a ton of vendors. Like I totally get that. I just think for me, because I'm like this year, I'm only doing like 8 to 10 weddings, and that's a very small for what I normally do. And so, I really want the people that I'm working with to be really excited about working with me too, because it is such like a collaborative excitement. And I'm sure you've had experiences where you had a client that's super stoked on your work and it's just made you so inspired. It's like, it's just this perfect recipe. Like, it's awesome. And so, I'm really kind of picky, not in like a, exclusive, like leaving people out stage, but just more for the heart behind their inquiry. And that really matters to me. If they, I'm very upfront with people about my work, with saying like, I'm the type of, wedding filmmaker that really values the heart behind your day. I don't mind having a slower pace. I don't know, pacing is huge. I hate to say that I have slow paced films because I'm really intentional with like making them feel like they move. But I'm fine with bringing things down a bit, and like, those are the moments that I really like to hone in on. And so I'm just open and honest with people about that, just with my brand. That's what I share about. That's what I post. So people can see, oh, that's what I'll receive. And I think that's helped me really just hone in on working with clients that I really feel connected to. It took a while to get there for sure. I think I, said yes. I did a ton of weddings from when I first started because I just wanted to get more experience. And that was awesome. But just over time, niching down has been really serving me really well recently. So, yeah.
It's like with indie films, usually it's a lot more story driven rather than like,
right.
I don't know, Transformers, right? Where it's just like action packed and like everything's hitting you and you're like fires everywhere and you're like, this is awesome, right? But with an indie film, it's almost like there's not much going on. It's a story about like one household, right? And like everyday problems that they're going through, and you really connect with the heart, and there's like a lot of emotion, and they really capture that well. And sometimes there's a scene where the camera doesn't even move, right? It's just still, and it's like, oh, it just brings out the right emotion. And like, I think that's something that you kind of base your films off of, right? Where like that type of filmmaking, which I just love.
Yeah, I've never thought about it, like comparing it to like Transformers, but that's so true. Like, I'm thinking about the little indie films that I've seen, and like, yeah, you're really in it for the long haul. When you sit down and watch one of those, you're like, okay, I'm in it to like be invested. I want to learn what what it's about. Whereas if you go to like, yeah, watch, like an action-packed movie, that's like, you want to see the action, like you're there for the adrenaline that's going to bring up in you, which is so fun. But yeah, I love leaning into creating work that feels like the latter, the more indie film type.
Yeah.
And music too is huge on that. Like, I've been really loving just finding music that's like simple and like subtle, that's not too that really just complements moments really well. It doesn't like take away from anything. I know there's a lot of songs out there that are like so like emotionally, like they really like the song itself is so, I don't know, like any chapter song or like anything like that. It's like so like perfect the way that song is in and of itself. It tells a story so well.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really loving like challenging myself to use just like ambient like sounds and like songs that are really subtle, but they just complement that moment so well. So the moment is what's shining. It's not like this sick verse or like, lyrics that are happening. It's like, we're looking at the moment, and that's what I really want to shine a lot, but it's so hard. It's like such a hard thing to find music like that all the time.
It is. And it takes a lot out of you, right? To where you like constantly be looking and playing with different sounds and mashing up songs together. You were saying that you do have a second shooter. Do you shoot with second shooters all the time?
Yeah, I always shoot with a second shooter. I love having the second shooter there just because to just like hone in on angles or like camera, like lenses that I just don't have on me at that time. And just having a trusted person there to even help with audio. That's my husband. Like whenever he comes and shoots with me, it's like, I just trust him. I'm like, you got audio? He's like, yeah, okay. And yeah, so I always have somebody.
Can you talk to me a little bit about like what that looks like if you're hiring somebody new, somebody that you haven't worked with before? I don't know if you always work with your husband or if you always work with like one or two people, but if you hire somebody new for a wedding, like what does that, what does that process look like when you're bringing them on? What do you tell them to do? What kind of role do you give them on the day?
Yeah. With people that I've never worked with before, I'm really, again, just like picky with who I would bring on, just because they're representing your brand. Like that's so important to have somebody that you like as a person. For me, it's more of just like their personality is on point, and they have just like a calming presence about them too is really nice, because there's so much you're worrying about that you just need somebody that's like, I got my head on, like I'm here, we I'm not gonna, that's just knows what they're doing and they feel grounded in that. I love it when like, I know I've had second shooters where like a grandparent is just like sitting in the room during getting ready and they just spark a conversation with the grandparent and like hit record on their camera. And like, I don't know, just things like that. Where it's like, I may not use it, but just for you to think ahead and be like, oh, this is so special. I'm going to just try to go out of my way to get this extra story element. Like that's so cool to me. And so valuable.
That is amazing. Yeah. Like that's, if anybody's listening out there, that's 100% what you need to be doing. Right. Like that's totally. So cool. I've never heard of it like that before. Not just to get the second angle, but to have your ears open and always be listening and always be looking for that special moment. Because, man, like I think there's so much going on with the timeline. You don't really allow access for those things, right? So it's like really hard to keep your ears out and just sit on the wall and just wait for the moment to kind of happen. But a second shooter or even a third shooter can really do that, to where like all the angles are being covered, the timeline, we're flowing with the timeline, things are going. But if you had somebody else to be like, oh, check this out, you know what I mean? Or had another camera in their hand when people are like walking into the ceremony or walking into the reception and they're kind of talking, or especially like when people come before the ceremony starts and they start seeing people they haven't seen in forever, those hugs are happening, those conversations are happening. Those are like huge moments that I would love to get, but I'm setting up tripods and setting up audio, you know what I mean? So like those are things that a second shooter could really keeping the ear out for. I love that you said that. It's cool.
For sure. No, I love that too. And sometimes I'll even be like, hey, can you set up tripods? Because there's things happening that like I really want to capture, you know? So having somebody that's just like versatile like that to just like switch it up and yeah, I love that a lot. I think there's so many skill sets like that each individual can bring to the table. It's so special, like that you can bring strengths that I don't have, or that somebody else can bring a strength that maybe you don't have. Like, it's just like, there's so many assets that you individually can bring. And you know, that's just something in my own work I've really tried to hone in on, is what are my strengths? How can I lean into those? And so, yeah, like, I don't know, sometimes I'm like, man, how cool would it be if you could have a team of filmmakers that was like somebody who's really technical will get just like the stellar shots, somebody who's like emotion. That's all I'm looking for. I mean, obviously it would just be chaos, but like having like 8 people filming, but it's just, yeah, you can't have it all, but knowing what you're really good at, I think that's at least been something that's been so helpful for me in my growth.
That's really cool. I always dream of that, of like, even if it's like 3 or 4 people, but 3 or 4 of like the best filmmakers coming together, and they just do that one company. You know what I mean? It's kind of like hard to do. But I've definitely wanted to do that, be a team of like 4 or 5 people that just crush it at every single wedding.
That would be the dream.
Yeah. What do you think the next 5-year goal looks like for you? Like, what do you envision? We did just come on Instagram and kind of share like, I have been feeling overwhelmed and I wonder if anybody else is going through this. And I was like, yep, me too. You know what I mean? So I think a lot
many people
are going through that. Have you found kind of like you've gotten out of that headspace, or like, what does that feel like to you? Like, what made you come out and kind of say that post? Can you speak on that?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I had a really, really wild backlog this like beginning of the year, because I had, you know, just the way my weddings were spaced out, so many deadlines, one after the other, kind of this spring. And so there was a point where I had like, 12 videos that I had to get through, with all pretty strict deadlines for like when I needed to have them done, which is just every creative's just like nightmare. Like, I'm coming out of this now. I have one more film left of 2022, but I was really burnt out for a while. I was like, geez, I was working a lot, and to the point where it kind of felt like I just didn't have like other things going on. It was just work. Like, my world was like work, and I hated that, because like my friends are always like, oh, you know, you can make your own hours. It's so cool. I'm like, yeah, but like also no.
Like, you can never turn it off.
Exactly. It's like I just got an office space in our house. We had one of our friends moved out, and so we took over that room. And I finally even just had a space to like put my things. Before, I was literally just like, it was mayhem, Jimmy. Like, I like put all our gear in like this part of the room, like house, where I just like, look, this is out of people's way. But it was just wild. And so my whole life just felt really chaotic. I was just like trying to just like get to the next thing. Okay, I made it. Okay, I made it. Now to the next thing. Okay, I made it. Now to the next thing. And that's just like not a healthy place to be. Like, it's not a healthy mindset. I wasn't like taking care of myself. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, I've just been so focused on everything else that like I haven't even thought I had time to like take care of myself, which feels so silly and sounds so dramatic, but I'm sure you can relate to it. It's just like, you have time, you're like, what do I like to do? You ask me what I do, I'm like, I don't freaking know.
Oh man, add a kid into that mix. Oh my gosh,
dude,
nothing.
I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many beauties about having a kid, but just running a business and doing that just sounds wild.
A lot. So all that means is that you have to focus on it a lot more and be very intentional with what you choose, because it'll sneak up on you and work will overtake your life.
Right. It's like you just have to be so special, like precious with your time, because that's so invaluable. Yeah. I like, oh gosh, just staying efficient has been like, I need to be better at that. Like efficiency, I can easily, especially just as a creative, you can easily just be like, I'm just going to listen to like a little bit more music. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been like 2 days and I haven't found anything. There's something's not clicking. Like, I'm not doing something right. I've had this excuse in my head where I'm like, oh, that's just like that's just the creative process. But there's a part of me that's like, I could be more efficient. I just need to build out these systems and setting up those systems so then in the future, I don't feel as overwhelmed.
Yes. That'll preach right there. And that's why I think it's so beautiful. I think, well, number one, we should be able to connect on that. Number two, there should be a space like this where people can say like, oh, I'm not the only one going through it. You know what I mean? But then number three, how can I learn how to delegate more? Or how can I learn, how to take on less? How do I learn how to raise my prices and come down and not film 40 weddings a year and get burnt out the second year into filming weddings? You know what I mean? I think that's what I would love to do too, is create a space and a platform to where we can kind of talk about like those answers, right? Like talk about like, hey, what are you doing to kind of fix what you just went through so you don't run into that again next year?
No, it's so cool. I love, even just with Second Society, I feel like I love what you said about like delegating too, because I just think I get a lot of questions. I was just on a call earlier and people were asking, do you shoot solo? I'm shooting solo and it's so hard. I was like, yeah, I don't, because I know like putting all that pressure on yourself is really hard. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of like work on the day, and just having somebody else there is so cool and relieves so much stress. And so, yeah, it's cool that you've created a space where people can easily find people in their area or where they're going. I think that's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you hopping on here so much. Like, it's been so fun kind of getting to know you a little bit better too.
Yeah, it's been cool to chat. Thanks for asking me to come on here.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you, Madeleine, for having this conversation. If you guys got any value out of this or you have any feedback, make sure to leave a comment below or DM me directly. Love being a part of this podcast. Love being a part of your journey as becoming a better filmmaker and photographer. And we're just excited to have you on Second Society.